just how much of an autist I am, I found this clip 5 years ago at the 5-hour, 9-minute mark of a 9-hour conference that I autistically listened to front to back. Like, this is what I was doing in 2019. Like, when people say, Benz, you came out of nowhere. Who put you on? You know, how does this guy, like, he must be working for the CIA. You know, like, how does he know all this stuff? And I've never heard of him before. It's because when you were never hearing of me, I was the watcher. I was the one spending morning, noon, and night, 24/7, doing the painful work of watching 9-hour, 7-minute videos. And by the way, this is day 2. I watched the first 9 hours of this in 2019, the day 1 part of this. So your boy put in the hours. But the reason I'm showing this to you is because, I get to this, actually, let me skip a little bit ahead before we watch this, so that when you watch this, you can process what this is. Okay. So if this is a difficult video for you watching, and you're going to watch the video in a second, here's another shocker. You paid for it. The Atlantic Council receives U.S. taxpayer funding from the State Department, USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, the CIA cutout, the Defense Department, the U.S. Marines, the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, and numerous other federal agencies. Every single one of those provide annual funding every year to this group you are about to watch, training journalists from Reuters, from the New York Times, from Der Spiegel, from Le Monde, in a frigging how I learned to stop worrying and love the bomb style smoky room, so that they can go back to their desks and flag disinformation in Trump tweets and pro-Brexit tweets. That means the same electorate who democratically elected Donald Trump as president in 2016 also paid a NATO think tank to train journalists to muzzle Trump's social media reach ahead of the 2020 election cycle. This is in 2019. This is 5 years ago. The Atlantic Council is known as NATO's think tank. I mean, just so you understand, it's literally NATO's civilian, clandestine, political action consensus building firm. This is what they're known for in Washington. They represent NATO. So again, their largest funder, the United States Department of State, and then Defense Department, Department of Energy, because they're about control of energy geopolitics, USAID, National Endowment for Democracy, the CIA cutout, the Marines, the Air Force, the Navy, all in a single year. What are they paying them to do? To influence and advance on the civilian side what the military, intelligence, and diplomacy sphere wants to be done at the geopolitical and military level. Okay? Now, another thing, I actually have a slide on this. Another thing to understand when you watch this, what we're about to watch, because we're going to be going deep on this. So I want you to don't look at this like these are just random people on a panel. Understand what this is, okay? The Atlantic Council has 7 CIA directors on its board. I don't know if maybe I can increase the zoom. Okay. A lot of people, and I say this all the time, but for people who are new here, I'm just going to sing the song again. A lot of people don't know that 7 former number 1 chiefs of the Central Intelligence Agency are still alive, let alone all concentrated together on the board of a single institution promoting worldwide social media censorship of politicians like Donald Trump and Jair Bolsonaro and Modi in India and Marine Le Pen in France. Okay, so I literally autistically frigging screenshotted all of this so you can see it. By the way, it's all just on the board of directors page. But as you can see, Michael Hayden serves on the board of directors of the Atlantic Council. Michael Hayden, obviously a signatory, one of the 51 spies who lie. Michael Hayden was the former head of the CIA, the former head of the NSA, and a former 4-star general. Michael Morell Michael Morell was another one of the 51 spies who lied about Russian disinformation with the Hunter laptop. Michael Morell currently serves on the board of the Atlantic Council. David Petraeus, former CIA director, currently serves on the board of the Atlantic Council. James Woolsey serves on the board of directors of the Atlantic Council. Leon Panetta, CIA chief, serves on the board of the Atlantic Council. You guys remember the 16-minute clip that I posted from our stream last week on Leon Panetta? Leon Panetta, the guy who was the warm-up act at the final night of the DNC right before Kamala Harris took the stage. Leon Panetta was the former head of the CIA, the former head of the Pentagon, and the former White House chief of staff, the gatekeeper to everyone who meets or has access to the president, as well as William Webster and Robert Gates. So that's 7 CIA directors, all currently serving on the board of the entity. Oh, sorry, one sec. This is autoplaying. All currently serving on the board of the organization hosting and mind virusing all these. Do you guys see this? I have to find a way to zoom this. Okay. I think this captures it. One sec. Do you guys see all these people? You see how there's a hashtag in the middle of the room? A social media hashtag, they're symbolically projecting the Atlantic Council has to control speech on social media. Social media is the problem because it's leading to the wrong people getting elected, and that's undermining the State Department's objectives and the Pentagon's objectives. And who they've gathered in the room are journalists from all over the world, from white shoe official media organizations, to train them in best practices on how to stop the flow of disinformation, i.e. anything that supports a populist candidate anywhere in the world. It's like a scene out of a twisted movie. Now, watch this again. 7 CIA directors, annual funding from all 4 branches of the U.S. military, plus the State Department. Now watch this, okay?
And just to start, we're going to come in with one of the most iconic quotes from one of the most iconic lead singers of all time.
Actually, I'm going to skip some of this ahead. I did clip this on a Rumble channel, but I don't want to do the ad, so I'm just going to...
Them, because whatever. Distort. If you don't like the evidence...
So he's going over the 4 Ds. And this is now like a framework, a formal framework that DARPA's counter disinformation stuff does. Ben Nimmo actually, I believe, is like actually a part of a formal DARPA counter misinformation program, along with Renee DiResta. And none of that stuff was publicly, none of that stuff they disclosed publicly, and it ended up coming out in things like the Twitter files and congressional subpoenas. So like literally, not only does he work for the military-funded Atlantic Council and the military-funded Graphica and started his career as a formal NATO propagandist at the NATO press office, but he came up with this framework, which is super useful to the censorship industry, and that they cite to this day in 2024. And it's called the 4 Ds of disinformation. Dismiss, distort, distract, dismay. So disinformation is not just something factually wrong. Look how devious this is. He's saying to flag something as disinformation, it doesn't have to be factually wrong. If it simply dismisses something that is right, or if it's as a kernel of truth, but it sort of distorts the truth, or if it's factually true, but it distracts from a larger truth, or if it's true, but it causes dismay, then all of those things are flaggable terms of service violation content in the bucket of disinformation. So, and again, I'm playing this because understand that the biggest bucket in the misdis malinformation world is malinformation. Information that is technically true, but that undermines public faith and confidence in a government-backed initiative or a blob-backed initiative. Okay? Like, you guys probably saw this in the Twitter files when Renee DiResta sent in, or, the Stanford Air Observatory sent emails to Yoel Roth saying, Moondance says say those again. You're going to see it in the clip, but it's dismiss, distort, distract, dismay, and he's going to have the journalists chant it back to him, and even train them. You're going to watch all this in a second, so just let me keep setting the stage. Understand that they are broadening the definition of disinformation to mean factually true information, which is now known as malinformation, that undermines a preferred blob narrative because its context undermines the narrative, even though its facts are true. And he is training all of these journalists to absorb this framework. This is how you have, it's not like some crazy thing that the Election Integrity Partnership pressured Twitter 1.0, Yoel Roth and squad, to say, you need to censor anyone who self-reports an adverse injury from vaccines. Because even if it's true and they really were injured by the vaccines, it still undermines public faith and confidence in the fact that vaccines are safe and effective. That was not some crazy, off-the-wall, going rogue thing for EIP. I guess at the time it was the Virality Project for censoring COVID. This is doctrine. Okay. And this doctrine is being incubated in the Atlantic Council, the military, State Department, CIA back channel of NATO's tank. Think tank, but a lot more emphasis on tank. Again, it's funded by all four branches of the military. So let's keep going.
Fake your own. You come out with your own alternative facts. Distract. If you're accused of something, then you accuse somebody else, either of the same thing or of anything else they can think of. And dismay, you say that if your critic continues down this path, the world will come to an end. Dismiss, distort, distract, and dismay.
Let me just so you understand how corrupt this is, I'm going to show you one other thing real quick. So you understand how evil this all is and can maybe make sense of some of the other things that I've told you guys. Donald Trump took the oath of office on January 20th, 2017. January 20th, 2017 was Donald Trump's first day in office. Do you know what happened the day before? One day before Donald Trump was sworn into office? The Atlantic Council, with 7 CIA directors and annual funding every year from the State Department, the Pentagon, and CIA cutouts like the National Endowment for Democracy, signed a formal deal with Burisma. Hunter Biden's Burisma signed a formal cooperation agreement with the Atlantic Council, this very entity that we are watching now to train how to kill on social media support for Donald Trump. The largest private gas producer in Ukraine forges relationship with the new U.S. administration, the Atlantic Council of the United States, and Burisma Group. So that the Atlantic Council could lobby on Burisma's behalf. And NATO, the Pentagon, the State Department, the CIA could all, through the back channel of the Atlantic Council, promote the profit, development, and expansion of Burisma. And again, this is where I come back to Hunter Biden and all the CIA and statecraft things that he was involved in, including being on the board of the NDI, which we are going to meet because they play a major role in this Telegram story. Burisma was an instrument of statecraft for the U.S. State Department in order to bankrupt Russia by building up the endogenous gas supply in Ukraine, whose rights were held by Burisma, so that it could be an alternative gas supply to Europe instead of Gazprom, Russia's main financial artery. Gazprom had all the profits for European gas, and they won in order to kill the Russian economy, in order to bankrupt the Russian war machine. The Pentagon, the State Department, and the CIA embarked, starting in 2007, actually, if you want to know how far back this goes, but really ramping up in 2014 when the Crimea annexation happened and the Ukraine coup ended in disaster when the Donbass broke away. Burisma and Naftogaz, the state-owned, this is because Burisma is the private gas company in Ukraine, and Naftogaz is the public one, so it's the feeder for Burisma. To build up Burisma and Naftogaz and partner with them so that North American energy companies could take the market share and the hundreds of billions of dollars of profits that previously flowed to Russia. So it achieves two ends. It bankrupts Russia. It brings them to their knees. They can no longer support paramilitary proxies in the Congo or in Niger. They can no longer defend Assad in Syria. They can no longer defend themselves in eastern Ukraine or in Crimea or in Russia proper. And so we walk all over them, and the U.S. blob owns the entire world militarily because we killed Russian gas. And they waged the same thing on Rosneft, Russian oil. Okay? That is why the Atlantic Council partnered with Burisma. But understand, they inked that deal the day before Trump was elected. And Trump threatened to ruin all of it. A sensitive, in-process, semi-clandestine operation to control the entire economics of the energy industry, and Trump's professed idea of neutrality with Russia would destroy all of that. Because Russia at that time was militarily backstopping the breakaway Donbass, which held half of Burisma's gas rights holdings, and the other half was was offshore from Crimea. So all the investments everyone had made in Burisma, all the investments that everyone had made in Naftogaz. Now understand this, okay? Chevron, 10 billion. One second. I want to show you guys the... Okay. This is my screenshot, but... Okay, so here you go. Chevron, this is from 2013, right before Chevron lost control of these investments. Okay? Because 2013, Chevron signs a $10 billion deal, $10 billion deal with Naftogaz, the feeder for Burisma, in 2013 for the rights in the Donbass in Crimea. So that investment went to zero when Russia took over that territory. So Chevron needed the Pentagon, the State Department, and the CIA to reconquer that territory to protect its $10 billion investment. Who else signed a deal with Naftogaz that went to zero? ExxonMobil. Who holds the processing rights? Halliburton. Dick Cheney's Halliburton. Dick Cheney was the chairman and CEO of Halliburton. Inks deal with Ukrainian firms to develop their fields. Okay? But this was all before it went tits up when the counter coup happened. The counter coup that Trump threatened to defund. Shell signed a $10 billion deal. The British gas giant. It was called Royal Dutch Shell, but now it's headquartered in London. So it's just Shell. Okay? Now understand a few other things. This picture of George Soros looking like he's going to make out with John McCain. Soros is a major investor in Halliburton. And Soros is also a major investor in the privatization effort of Naftogaz, so that it's not Ukraine making the money when they kill Russian gas. It's Soros portfolio companies, okay? It's the money. This is why their whole thing, GeorgeSoros.com, literally his own friggin' website, in addition to the Open Society playbooks and all the NGOs, the whole thing, and the IMF proposal that Viktor Yanukovych refused and what set off the Euromaidan coup. The centerpiece of it was breaking up the state-owned gas company and selling it off to North American and London-based energy companies. So that, because this is a grand Ukraine energy play, you get two birds with one stone. You can invoke national security and national interest by destroying a great power competitor and a national security threat in Russia, while making $1 trillion along the way, because not only are you destroying Russia and using the battering ram of the Pentagon, the CIA, and the State Department to do it, but now you own the market, so you make all the revenues that Russia used to make. So serendipitously, you get filthy rich by using U.S. taxpayer money to fight a foreign war and a foreign gas diplomacy operation that you happen to make all the money from once you now own the market because Russia doesn't. Okay? And there's a lot here, but let me keep going. But I just want to again say this. This is why I come back to what the Atlantic Council is, just like what the Carnegie Endowment is, just like what the Wilson Center is, and all these other major players in the Telegram censorship story that, again, we're going to get to a little bit later here, is because NATO funds the Atlantic Council to achieve on the civilian side what is necessary for the military or statecraft objective. The State Department and the Pentagon are opposing Russia, but they can't just march into Moscow out of a helicopter. So they have the civil society funded cutout take the actions in the civilian sector that promote NATO's military objectives through the Atlantic Council. Okay, you guys getting this? Let me know. Is this pace okay? Is this too many asides? I just feel like you need to understand. This is going to be really helpful when you see how shocking this clip is. But give me some feedback in the chat. I'm just going to take a second and just see if this is all right. We're like, we haven't even started. We have not even penetrated the surface. You guys have no idea how deep this thing goes. Okay, now let's get back to it. So understand, 7 CIA directors on its board, funded by the Pentagon, the State Department, and CIA cutouts, literally as a formal agreement to lobby for Burisma, is even funded. Okay, all right, enough of that. And that is the organization. Oh, by the way, one thing that I pulled up here, because again, I screenshotted this. This is Victoria Nuland in December 2013, just 2 months before the CIA-backed Rent-A-Riot in the Maidan Square, that January 6th, that insurrected the democratically elected president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, out of power. Just 2 months before that, the U.S. Embassy, at an event, is the head of the U.S. This is the head of the U.S. Embassy. I guess technically she was the assistant secretary for European and Eurasian affairs, but she was that's the regional coordinator. Or was she the head of the embassy? And was it Jeff Pyatt was deputy assistant secretary? Or sorry, was assistant secretary? She is at a meeting. Now, in this clip, Victoria Nuland brags on video that the State Department gave $5 billion to the Ukrainian civil society activists who would then be deployed as street muscle in the color revolution to overthrow the government just 3 months later. Because I think technically it was February 2014. So 3 months. No, 2 months. December, January. Yeah, 2 months. So this is the head of the U.S. Embassy bragging about what a powerful capacity they have that they can activate on the ground in Ukraine, and what is right by, who is it sponsored by? Can you guys read this? You guys see this? Do I need to pull this up in a new image and zoom? As the U.S. Embassy is bragging about the $5 billion in political muscle they pumped into their proxy groups in Ukraine to overthrow the government, the event is sponsored by the very companies who had just signed $10 billion deals with Ukraine's gas giant, Chevron and ExxonMobil. Those are the U.S. companies, but Shell and the U.K. are part. Okay, so understand, the fucking oil and gas companies are sponsoring the State Department and its actions to overthrow Ukraine's government so that they control the profits, so that ExxonMobil and Chevron get all the money that Gazprom and Rosneft used to get. And Exxon and Chevron's minion, Victoria Nuland, activated the $5 billion funded Rent a Riot January 6th I'm out of office operation when 1.5 weeks after Viktor Yanukovych, the president of Ukraine, rejected the final offer of the State Department for a financial deal that would have required Naftogaz to be privatized. You getting the picture? This is why I always come back to the structure of the blob. We have that iron trifecta on the government level, which is, the technical operations and implemented, funded by $900 billion to the Pentagon, hundreds of billions to state and CIA and USAID combined. The inner guts of the blob on the government level are the State Department, the Pentagon, and the CIA, with USAID in the middle. And underneath that, you have the U.S. soft power swarm army of NGOs, activist groups, media institutions, nonprofits, and allied government-funded capacity-built assets. But on top of it is the corporate and financial sponsors of the government action. And they will be the donors to make sure that the appropriate personnel is slotted into the State Department to accomplish those goals. So on the one hand, the government is the bad actor here, because they're the ones who are funding and orchestrating the black ops to topple the government. But there's a level above them, which is how these people make their money, which are the corporations and the hedge funds and the private equity firms and the banks whose businesses and whose investments are dependent on government operations to secure their markets and to maximize the profits. So ExxonMobil and Chevron are sponsoring Victoria Nuland. Victoria Nuland is sponsoring a $5 billion Rent-A-Riot army in the streets of Ukraine. I mean, technically, ExxonMobil and Chevron are sponsoring Victoria Nuland. Victoria Nuland is sponsoring a swarm army of capacity-built civil society institutions. And that swarm army of capacity-built civil society institutions are then sponsoring the street muscle, the unions, the trade workers, the youth groups, the students, the activists, and the media institutions overthrowing the democratically elected government, okay? So understand the hierarchy and the power dynamics between all those different stakeholder groups in these operations, okay? Now let's get back to the Atlantic Council clip. Okay. Yeah, thank you, David. Let's get back to this now, okay? So again, this is the Atlantic Council, partner with Burisma, 7 CIA directors on its board, funded by the Pentagon, the CIA, and the State Department.
This is a model that I derived from studying Russian information operations particularly, but we've seen so many different operators using it in so many different environments.
So he's saying, I developed this initially to stop the Russians, but we can actually use it to stop pro-Trump sentiment.
This appears to be a fairly generic model of the way in which witnesses will get attacked. There are many other ones, and we're about to play with this whole concept. So Andy will talk you through some of the rules.
Sure. So all of you should have some of these cards on the table. If you don't, look on another table and steal one that's not being used, because these are going to help get our attention. We are going to...
Do you see what that placard says?
Set of slides.
Sound from video is really weak. Okay, let me add a gain filter to pump it up. Hold on a second here. Let's see, is this better?
Showing quotes from different organizations and individuals who are using certain rhetorical devices to make their argument.
Okay, so he's saying we're going to do an exercise. Journalist in the room, journalist in the room, journalist in the room, journalist in the room, journalist in the room. Pentagon, CIA, and State Department spooks here, okay? And he's saying we're going to now, I, sponsored by the Pentagon, are going to train you, private sector independent journalists, to spot the rhetorical devices people online use to make their argument. That's what he said.
And so, if you go through all of them, at least one of these four will apply. Again, dismiss, distort, distract, dismay. Everyone say it with me. Dismiss, distort, distract, dismay.
They are literally getting independent private sector journalists. The CIA, the Pentagon, and the State Department are getting swarms of journalists to repeat back to them like bleeding sheep. Bah, bah. Say it with me. Say it with me. Distract, distort, dismiss, dismay. Obedience school is exactly right. NATO obediently training journalists to bleat back to them the censorship framework.
Excellent. I'm not going to ask you to do it backwards because that'll just mess all of you up. So we're going to go through each slide, and if you think you know which of the 4 Ds it is, we want you to hold up your card like this and get our attention.
The 4 Ds of disinformation.
You're welcome to scream, I call bullshit, too, if you're comfortable, but it's not a requirement.
Did you hear that?
Other points.
He said you are welcome to scream the word bullshit, but it's not required because the placards they have distributed to every single journalist. Look at there's like 200 journalists in this crowd surrounding an unholy hashtag at the center, and every single journalist has been given a placard that says the word bullshit on it. And NATO, the CIA, the Pentagon, and the State Department, the Blob, is telling the journalists to take their state-issued bullshit sign and hold it up to the light on what you are about to see.
There will be occasions where it's more than just one of these 4. There could be 2, 3, perhaps even all 4 could be at play. And of course, if you look at every use of rhetoric in politics and persuasion and propaganda.
Use of rhetoric in politics and persuasion. Understand, we are way outside the jurisdiction of true or not. It's about stopping any kind of rhetorical ability to make your argument if it favors a populist political candidate. Again, this is the summer of 2019, a year and a half before the 2020 election. Just so you understand how it was possible, because the Atlanta Council was the very first partner for Facebook's disinformation team. Okay? And they were the Atlanta Council was the formal partner of the Department of Homeland Security to censor the 2020 election and COVID. I mean, again, you guys have no idea how deep this goes, but let's just keep going.
Today, there are going to be more techniques than these 4. And so we want you to put your thinking caps on.
Ken.
And while we'd love to hear...
Put your thinking caps on and think creatively about how to censor the tweets you're about to see, citing any one of these 4 censorship rationales.
if you can come up with relevant uses of the 4Ds. If there are other rhetorical tricks and devices you think are going on a particular quote, we'd love to hear from you. So with that, let's play.
Let's play the censorship game. How can you justify telling Facebook, telling Twitter, telling YouTube that the thing you saw online is disinformation and getting them to censor it? Let's play a training exercise for journalists by the fucking Pentagon. You guys ready for this? Do you guys think you're ready for this? Tell me in the chat what you think you're about to see. Just write in the chat a tweet that you think is like in the ballpark. I'm curious how good a sense you guys, just write a sample tweet you think that they are going to train journalists to censor. By the way, I see this user says tanks to tweets. Amazing, amazing, amazing handle. Because, I'm the one who broke the NATO tanks to tweets story because I went through another 5-hour NATO video and then found the entire branding campaign around it. Yeah, America First, Stable Genius. Okay, here we go. Let's play. Witch hunt. The Pentagon, the State Department, and the CIA gathering journalists from around the world in a room, handing each one a state-issued placard that says bullshit, and imploring them to think creatively about ways to get the tweet censored, citing any four of these rationales. And the first tweet in the deck is from @RealDonaldTrump in January 2019, calling Russiagate a witch hunt. That is NATO's definition of censorable disinformation on all social media platforms. The sitting U.S. president, with his, at the time, free and unfettered, most popular Twitter account in the world, tweeting out 2 words, witch hunt. And NATO is wheeling in the world's most highest perched journalists from around the world to train them to report this tweet for disinformation.
Keep them in the air if you think you know the answer.
Yeah, you got to keep it in the air.
Keep
them in the air. Keep your bullshit placard cards in the air.
So we can
okay, yes.
Yep.
And stand up and speak.
You guys see this? Let's just get a frozen shot of this guy.
Keep them in the air if you think you know the answer.
Yeah, you got to keep it in the air.
Keep it in the air so we can
okay, yes.
Yep.
And stand up and
look at the journalist like a good little dog holding up his NATO-issued bullshit placard to the sitting United States president, the United States president who funded the Atlanta Council. And again, you can imagine how screaming mad I was in the White House in 2020 about this, because I showed this video to everyone. I had a whole friggin' Encyclopedia Britannica of video archives of all this. But the United States government was funding the overthrow of the United States government. And I'm sitting here staring across from people at the White House budget office saying, how can you let this happen? Donald Trump's Pentagon, who hates him and wants him gone, and Trump is warring with, I'm being asked to look up quotes for Donald Trump about what JFK had to say about betrayal by his own generals. And he's funding this event as the Pentagon trains journalists to stop the ability to use social media to counter media propaganda about Russiagate. So here, good little dog journalist gets his little NATO doggy treat. Let's see what he says.
Speak loudly, and actually even better, wait for the mic to come.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, it's obviously it can be any number of the Ds. You can say it's
Oh, there's another one. They called on a different person who.
distorting what they're saying, or
It could be any one. We could get this censored as disinformation as any one of these four. So let's just listen to this.
or distracting them from whatever the issue is, saying the issue isn't real. They're just after me because, as they're witches and it's evil, I'm the injured party here. So,
I'm the injured party here. So it distracts from the integrity of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
could be a whole lot of them. Trump's got a nice range when it comes to disinformation.
Trump's got a nice range when it comes to disinformation.
Does anyone have a number one pick that they would like to mention related to this one? They said dismissed.
Yes, dismissed. Yeah.
Dismissed?
Dismissed. Other voices?
How many of you think dismissed? Raise your card, please.
Look at that. They get everyone to raise their placard in consensus agreement that Trump's tweet is disinformation. NATO training, using peer pressure, getting them all in a room, issuing them state-issued, Pentagon-funded placard cards that read the word bullshit on it, and encouraging them really get into the guts of it and find an even stronger articulation for how we can get Trump's tweet calling Russiagate a witch hunt. Because remember, this is before. This was June 21. The Mueller hearing was in. I'm sorry. This is June 2019. The Mueller hearing, I believe, was in July of 2019. So Russiagate was at its absolute apex, and they needed it, and they needed political support for Mueller. Because just weeks later, Mueller was to testify about all the evidence, and then it all came crashing down because it turned out Mueller had fucking bubkiss.
We're on to something here.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Hey, wait, Jennifer, I flipped this. You can go to the FFO Rumble channel. Here, let me show you the link that you can go to for this, okay? Like, we can just watch from this, if you guys want, because I think I even captioned it.
Distract.
So here goes.
yeah, absolutely. So, you're right that underneath that attempt, there are. He's twisting the story. He's accusing somebody else of the same thing, right? But
He's twisting the story. He's accusing someone else of
the
doing
main
it.
thing is what he's saying is like, don't listen to them because it's a witch hunt.
So it's disinformation because he's saying don't listen to them.
So that was our first one.
All right. Number two.
Number 2 is a Brexit ad. Vote to leave the European Union. Because we send the EU £350 million a week. Let's fund our NHS instead, their own public health care instead. So understand, this is a factually true data point. The United Kingdom, as part of the European Union, was taking United British citizen taxpayer money and giving £350 million a week to the EU when they had an underfunded public health system through the NHS in crisis. They said, we want to make Britain great again. We want affordable health care. Instead of paying the EU, let's leave the EU so that we don't die from a 18-month waiting list from our underfunded NHS. But NATO badly wanted to stop the United Kingdom from leaving the EU. The State Department badly wanted to stop the United Kingdom from leaving the EU. And then even post-Brexit's formal passing, to shape the nature of the Brexit so that it was effectively blunted, because that's what ended up happening. They basically are still in the EU economically, just not formally, because they were able to destroy the Brexit Party and Nigel Farage's movement and co-opt it, and the whole Liz Truss disaster. But this is a factual data point. There's nothing mis or disinformation about this. But But according to the State Department definition, this is malinformation because even though it's a factually true statement, it still undermines public faith and confidence in the narrative that Brexit is bad for the British people. So understand, the State Department wanted to stop Trump because of his neutrality with Eurasia diplomacy, stopping the Seize Eurasia Atlantis blob, and they wanted to stop Brexit. So they funded the Atlantic Council to train hundreds of journalists to censor all social media speech which supported Donald Trump or Brexit. Oh, did I not post a link here? Link here, okay?
Topical here.
Remember, cards up when you have an idea.
Remember, cards up. Hold up your state-issued bullshit placard.
Back here, and please wait for the mic.
Distort. And Ben Nimmo, DARPA man, Atlanta Council man, Graphica, literal frigging professional NATO PSYOP guy who's now at Facebook, says, you the man. You're right. Distort.
Any other takers? Any suggestions?
Well, let's ask. How many of you think this one has distort involved?
Look at everyone raising their placards. Good. I'm getting it right. I got the exercise right.
Okay, that's a lot.
Look at everyone holding up the
Any
bullshit
other-
placard and smiling. Ah, yes, I'm getting it now, guys.
Sure.
Boy, this is powerful stuff. I can report fucking anything. Someone says we're paying 350 million pounds to the EU. Disinformation. What do you mean disinformation? This is literally government data, but it's distracting.
Devices anyone wants to mention? We've got a big hand over here. You just kept your hand up? Her hand goes back down. Are there any others, or are we just going to stick with that one? Yes, man, right here. Distract. Okay, so for those who couldn't hear, it's also distract because it's trying to focus attention on the NHS.
So this is reportable for disinformation because it's distracting the British public on focusing on domestic problems on the NHS when they should be focused on how great staying in the EU is. Do you understand why the top level framing that I said on the Tucker segment is this is the end of civilian control over government? This is all four branches of the U.S. military paying its intermediary, the Atlantic Council, to kill the ability for civilians to vote against a policy opposed by the Pentagon and the State Department and the CIA, the blob.
Rather than the vote itself.
Rather than the vote itself. But you make the vote based on the information. I mean, it's pointless to argue against this because this is just a literal fucking astroturfed op. They don't give a flying fuck about the substance. They want it censored. That's why they're training them to do this.
One more example over here, perhaps. And the microphone is right behind you, so hang on.
Yeah, we've been having a side conversation over here about in-group, out-group dynamics. And a group I've been part of, we added a fifth D, which was divide. Because
Divide.
we kept seeing it so often.
Yes.
Very good.
Very, very good.
Nice.
And this thing goes on and on and on. But let's get back to the story because let's get back now to Telegram.